Watching Joker, I had the pretty much the same reaction and same emotion, same feeling as I do when I'm involved in a traffic backup because of an accident. You know, you sit in traffic that plods along drearily for about 2 hours. You know, you find moments where you're able to, maybe you're with your family members or someone else is in the car, and you find moments that, you know, you're able to pass the time away that are enjoyable, you know, playing word games or whatever. In other words, you work your way through the tragedy of having to sit through all the traffic. And then you get to the point where there's a climax, where you actually are up at the accident and you see it 2 or 3 smashed cars. And you're like, wow, look at that. Jeez, look at that. Wow. And that's exciting. And then you drive on, traffic clears up, and you realize, I don't know if it was worth sitting in traffic that long, after all. Yeah, that's pretty much how I felt sitting through this movie. Wow, it was really dreary. Some people have said depressing. I didn't necessarily feel depressed. I just felt a sense of unease. And the reason for that has really less to do with the movie than to do with reality. That, the FBI had been monitoring Facebook sites where people, I guess they're called incels, were talking about how they were going to spur violence or incite violence at these films. Possibly there were going to be shootings at this movie. And I sat through the film uncomfortably the whole time because this movie looks like a textbook origin story for an incel. The movie itself, I guess the term is tour de force. It is an amazing performance by Joaquin Phoenix. I have no idea. It's amazing how he was able to go on set for, assuming they shot for at least 30, 45 days, all the principal photography. I don't know how he was able to maintain composure or stay sane doing some of the things he does on screen, or going through some of the things that the character goes through on the screen. There was that, maybe a week ago, the article came out, or TMZ or whatnot, that throughout some scenes he would just shut down and walk off the set. And I think I read that it was just so intense having to draw from that some well of emotions to create that character, that he just had instances of micro breakdowns, I guess, and he had to leave the set. It had nothing to do with anything external or anything like that. You know, when an actor gets into a character, they draw from experience. I guess that's the method acting performance, or they have to create something that they can use to adequately or efficiently portray the character. And this character is just all kinds of f***ed up. And just recently, we also saw Joaquin Phoenix walk off of an interview where the interviewer asked him if he was concerned about violence being incited because of this film. I think it's a valid question. Yeah, this, I believe, is an Oscar-worthy performance by Joaquin Phoenix. The other performance that stood out for me was Robert De Niro. Initially, he was not that impressive to me. He was doing his, late stage Robert De Niro acting, where it's like he doesn't really give a damn about it. Like he's reading all of his lines off cue cards. But there's a penultimate scene in the third act, which I'm not going to spoil anything. I will say that he meets up with Arthur Fleck. And that scene is probably, for me, the one of the best scenes of the film. It put me in mind of the scene in the movie No Country for Old Men, which to me set a standard for how a scene should go. The scene where Anton Sugar is at the gas station and he's just basically talking to this guy. It's just a one-sided conversation, but it is one of the most intense scenes in my memory. There's a scene like that takes place between Arthur Fleck and Robert De Niro, and we see a little bit of the De Niro that I'm used to, at least from, there's a little bit of that Mean Streets, Goodfellas that comes out. It's a brilliant scene, and that scene to me is the scene that made me say, okay, I kind of get this. Because up until that moment, that scene, I was pretty much fixed on the rating I was going to give this film. And then that scene kind of changed the game or turned the corner for me. And I was like, okay, this works. This much works. Now, anyone who knows me or follows me on Twitter or Facebook, you know that for me, it's not really the Joker unless there is some sort of chemical bath involved where the guy gets his face bleached permanently and he gets a rictus grin that is involuntary, a Chelsea smile that is permanently scarred on his face. And that was the motivation, besides having a rough life, but that chemical bath and that disfigurement, as we saw in the original 1989 Tim Burton Batman, we saw that's what led to the Joker's ultimate psychosis, for him going insane. Okay. I am going to put that aside for now, believe it or not, and say that even though this version of the Joker does not undergo that same sort of treatment, in other words, there's no permanent disfigurement, this was a pretty damn good origin story to explain why the Joker is insane. I'll give the writers that. They crafted a very believable story. For the most part, all of it is realistic. Things happen that lead to the Joker's madness that are all believable. And as I said, as I was sitting through this film in the theater, unsettled the whole time, the things that happen to this Joker are all too real. And I read an article about the fact that even though this movie is bleak and dreary, and we can argue whether or not it's a good film, it's a damning statement on the state of mental health today. And there's a line in this film that rings true, something along the lines of the most difficult thing to do is live in a society where you admit you have a mental illness, but you are expected not to show it. Something like that. So I give this movie props for being an indictment on how we treat mental health in this society. This film also really does a good job in capturing, almost slavishly, well, it does a good job. It kind of, sometimes it gets in the way, but it does a good job of capturing that 70s aesthetic. If not for the fact that we know it was directed and produced in 2018, released in 2019, one would think that this was a movie made in the 70s, directed by Martin Scorsese. It takes a lot of cues from Taxi Driver, Mean Streets. The only thing is missing is the crash zoom in. But the color palette, even the Warner Brothers logo, it uses the old, which I actually remember, that's how old I am. It uses the old Warner Brothers logo where the W kind of balloons out and it goes into the red with a white W. Another thing it does that was kind of clever, I guess, was the title sequences at the end. You know, nowadays we're used to the scroll. What they do here is they use stills like they did in old-fashioned movies, where they show the title or the position or the actor and the series of ellipses, and then we see the role they played either in front of or behind the camera. So Todd Phillips, I guess, is a student of 70s cinema. Either that or he knew he had a script that owed a lot to the 70s aesthetic. He follows through with that on every level. He even had a couple of sisters in here wearing afros, so he was dedicated to that look. We see Arthur Fleck smoking in quite a few offices. We hear commercials on TV that recall memories of my childhood, and it's the only way I could possibly buy someone of Robert De Niro's obvious age having a talk show. The production design is also amazing. Clearly this is shot in, well, it looks like it's shot in New York, with New York as a stand-in for Gotham. But man, the grunginess of New York in the 70s, all the graffiti, all the dirt and the trash, not that that's all gone, but you know, it's a lot better than it used to be. That's all on display here. I was amazed at how they made, again, Gotham / New York look like a throwback to those eras where the city was just on an economic downturn. It really looks like the city is on edge. I just wish Todd Phillips, the director, could have found some way to tell this story without it being just a complete sinkhole. There's really no hope in this film. I get it, but by the same token, you know, the movie is just bleak. I can't really put it into any more words. I'll say this much. Had they done this Joker story, again, me putting aside that this is not the Joker that I like. My Joker does not just put on makeup and red lips. Anyway, had they done this Joker story with Batman in it, this would have been a fantastic movie. Now, having said that, there is a pretty significant connection to Bruce Wayne in this film. I won't say anything more than that. However, again, you know, it's not enough, because what we see of the Wayne Foundation, and that's all I'll say, it really throws off the timeline that makes me think that this either is, one, not the true Joker that Batman will face, or two, the Joker that Batman faces in this universe is pretty damn old by the time Batman meets him. So it's kind of a mystery. You know, I kind of respect that. They leave that open. And someone on Twitter said this is an Elseworlds version of the Joker, which very well may be the case, because one of the plot lines in this film, and I'm not going to give anything away, is that there are a number of people in this film that could wind up being the actual Joker that Batman meets, given if we accept that Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal of the Joker is not the Joker that Batman will eventually meet. And they don't really give us any clear answer on that. One of the performances I forgot to mention before was Zazie Beetz. Now, as far as I was led to believe, Zazie Beetz was an up-and-coming star. What with her turn in the last Deadpool film, and I believe she was in, there was some other film she was in, I can't remember right now. But I thought her star was up and coming. She's in this film as a potential love interest for Arthur Fleck, but her role is so minuscule, I have no understanding as to why she took the role. Her character provides a pretty clever twist, which I won't reveal, and I'm ashamed to say I can't believe I didn't predict it coming, because there's another scene involving Arthur and his mom that I did predict. I posted it up on Twitter, so don't look at my Twitter account if you don't want the film to be spoiled, or that aspect of the film to be spoiled. I'll say again, it is a bleak, kind of downer of a movie. There's no sense of any hope in the film. It's like this is the beginning, like this is the first chapter. It feels like it could be the first chapter of a longer Batman film. But Joaquin Phoenix's performance as the Joker, and I feel like I should say as Arthur Fleck, it goes with you when you leave the theater. You don't leave it behind in the theater. It sticks with you. And like I say, I would be surprised if he's not nominated for an Oscar for this movie. That's how good he is in it. And what he went through to do this, he apparently lost tons of weight. I thought maybe it could have been CGI, but it sure didn't look like it to me. But that's what allows me to give this movie, despite the fact that it was a slog and dreary. The last portion of the third act, where there is a connection with Batman, which was kind of clever, I thought. And the fact that scene with Robert De Niro confronting Arthur Fleck, and the subsequent scenes after that, it raised it to a 3-reel film for me. I'm giving it 3 reels. But just be warned, it is unsettling. Given what's happening today, I could see this movie being determined to be irresponsible. I mean, I don't believe in censorship, but like I said, this movie is like a textbook example of what loners, lone wolf people, mass shooters, incels, I can see them going to this film and being inspired, and that's not a good thing. But so I'm judging it on the art only. 3 reels, but be prepared to walk out of the theater like, Man, as a matter of fact, there's two other films I can recall that I felt the same way when I walked out of the theater. Bad Lieutenant with Harvey Keitel back in the late 90s, I believe it was. And Passion of the Christ. I mean, both of those films, I just felt like I wanted to drive into oncoming traffic on the way home. I didn't exactly feel that way with this because the ending was so compelling, but it's not a lift me up type of film. Don't bring your kids under any circumstances. Okay, there you have it. That's the martini.